So I'm Edward Corlew. First I kind of want to know a little bit about everybody here. So who here has actually heard of Fuego? A few people. Okay. And did you hear about it? You guys keep your hands up for 1 second. Did you hear about it because of the Green Mountain Game Festival, or? Okay, mostly everybody. Okay, cool. All right. So yeah. I started an independent studio called Radio Static a couple years ago. Fuego is our first game. Previously, I worked at Riot Games, and I also worked at a company called First Playable Productions. So I worked on a game called Moxie Girls, Be True, Be You. I also worked on a Hello Kitty game, Club Penguin, and a game you guys probably never heard of called League of Legends. So I was gonna play the trailer, but it seems like everybody here has probably seen it, so I might just skip over that. Okay. All right. So we'll play it. There's sound, but gotcha. Changing that. Okay, so basically it's a Mexican standoff game, and it's 2 players. Each player gets a bandit, and they have 10 seconds to place it. During that time, they can't see what the other player is doing. After the 10 seconds is up, their move is locked in and then revealed to their opponent, and they get the next bandit. After all the bandits have been placed, it goes into the shootout. The player with the most gold wins. This game actually started looking like this. This is like the first kind of playable build we had of it. And as you can see, it's, or maybe not see, but it's just spaceships and meteors. So I just kind of wanted to show this slide because don't underestimate local playtests. We actually changed the art style pretty early because of local playtests that we were doing. And this was even before we knew that the game was actually a Mexican standoff. The mechanics were the same. The mechanics actually is how we discovered the theme. Also, local playtests are usually more intimate, so it's kind of hard to get feedback. It's usually like with your friends. So like the feedback we got, we knew it wasn't really honest. Like, oh yeah, that was kind of fun. So you don't really get, you might not get great feedback for playtests, which is kind of an advantage to showing it at festivals. It's definitely a great place to start, like when you're prototyping. And of course you can identify problems. So the first place we ever showed it publicly was GMGF. I don't know if a lot of you knew that. And he's in the picture. Yeah, so we came up here to see Rami talk, and we saw an empty table, so we ended up just setting up and joining everybody else who was showing their games. We asked, of course. But this kind of became like a running theme of how we would demo the game. It was like sort of unofficially. And you can kind of see the game in the picture. The art looks a lot different there. But it was good enough to get a sense of what we wanted the game to be. So showing it, I actually have a demo of like what it looked like. So like this is this is the art then.
Hi,
this is
my
all
name is
programmer
Eddie
art.
Corlew. I'm the co-founder.
And I'm gonna mute myself, but this is like what we were showing competitions. And as you can see, it's pretty terrible. But the actual mechanics of the game was a lot different when we were showing it here as well. So when we showed it at GMGF, actually, we got enough feedback to actually change the mechanics. It used to be each player could place their bandits as fast as they want, and then the first player, to place all their bandits and then hit go would start the shootout. And I forget how exactly it came about, but I know it was at GMGF that we decided to switch the mechanics completely to do this kind of like each player is taking the turn at the same time, and they have just a time limit. All right. So kind of the lessons here is just like be prepared to show anywhere, and don't be afraid to show even if you're not officially allowed to show. Or I mean, we did ask, but we didn't always ask. So yeah, there's really good feedback that we got here. This is in January 2014, I think. Maybe it was even, yeah, I think that was the year. And so as most of you probably know, it's so crucial to get this kind of feedback early. Because like if we got the feedback to change our core mechanic, 6 months from this point, we would have never done it. So that's kind of like the catch-22 in like showing at festivals. It's like you want to show at festivals as early as you can, but your game's really not showable at festivals. So we decided just to kind of show it in this like unofficial capacity until the game was more presentable. So during this time between like January and GDC, which is usually around March, we reworked the new mechanic into the game, and we actually contracted an artist to start giving us some decent looking art so that we could show at GDC. So most of you probably know what the Games Developers Conference is, so I'm just going to skip over that. This is what the game looked like at GDC. So
static here to show Flamingo, which is
my partner. I don't think we need to listen to him. So if we skip ahead, this is what the art started to look like then. And you can see like the little watch in the corners, the timer, and like, yeah. So this is like the core of the game, and it still is, but we changed a lot from this build, including the art. So at GDC, it's a huge conference. There's like 25,000 developers from all over the world. So just, imagine showing your game to even just a handful of those people. You just get tons of good feedback. Of course, there's like the IGF Awards as well there. We didn't even pay for a pass at GDC. I don't know what that was, but yeah, we didn't even pay for a pass, and we just kind of went around trying to talk to developers and showing our game. We sat in a Hotel Marriott lobby. Apparently a lot of developers hung out there too. And so we were like, hey, you should come over here and look at this. And we ended up meeting like Astros Banditos, who worked on Westerado, by playing like tag outside of the Moscone Center. There was like this kind of like free game thing going on, and we just decided to join it. And then, yeah, so we met those guys, and they gave us like awesome feedback. We met Zach of Zachtronics. He did Space Kim. He gave us really good feedback too. And most of the feedback kind of pointed out like, you need a new art direction. And I can't stress this enough, like your art is so important for festivals. Like you would think that like, oh, it's like a really fun game, so it should just be accepted, but you have to look at these festivals also as like, I mean, not all of them, but the way I see it is like, it's a place where people pay to come and visit, and so like your game has to look appealing in some capacity. And then we also started to develop the pitch for the game. This is actually when we started to discover that, oops, it was is this in full screen? Sorry, one sec. Okay. Oh, go backwards. Yeah, so this is when we started to kind of discover what the game actually was. Like, when we were talking about, I think it was just one day we were just discussing it, and I was like, it's kind of like a Mexican standoff. And then, so we kind of just started running with that with the pitch. Like, so anytime we would come up to a developer, that would be like our elevator pitch. Like, we're working on this online Mexican standoff game. And that's also really important too, just to kind of catch people's attention. Yeah, so the other thing that was really fun about this experience is like, so you think about sharing your game at festivals, and really, like, the only thing you think about is like, well, you want to show it so that more people, you get more exposure. But that's really like only one reason to show your game at festivals. There's like a ton of reasons, and hopefully I can touch upon some of them in this presentation. One of them is like, you get to meet other developers, and that's like, that was to me the best experience showing Fuego. You learn so much from them. Like, I said that we didn't even get a GDC pass, and we used to get a pass, previously from our works or whatever. And we'd go to the talks, and the talks are pretty good, but there's the GDC Vault as well. So you can always just watch those online now. The most I've ever gotten from GDC is like always talking to other developers, just one-on-one or in group settings. We also ended up finding an amazing new artist by asking other developers. So networking is another great reason to go to these events. It can be pretty pricey to get out there, especially for us. I don't know how many people out here live out west permanently, but it's pretty pricey to get a plane ticket out there, and then you have to pay for a hotel. So there are ways to get. Also, I don't know how many people know this. There are ways to get free passes to GDC. Like if you volunteer as a to help out at the GDC, you can potentially get a free pass for that. And I think they started to like pay volunteers as well last year, but I've never done that. So, all of the feedback that we got was like your art style. Like I remember one person said, "What are these bugs on the screen?" And that was like paid art. So it was a little demoralizing, but we decided. Okay, we should probably listen to what people are saying and change the art style. So my partner knew of a really great artist. He couldn't do the art for us, but he ended up doing this kind of animation mock-up, and this started to drive the style of Fuego. And at the time, it was called Flamingo. Oops, why is this not playing? There we go. One sec. You gotta hear the beginning, because it's pretty good. Before this video, like we were like, oh, it needs to feel like a Quentin Tarantino movie, and like all this other kind of cliche stuff that you'd probably say when you're making a Mexican standoff game. And then I don't know, I saw this and I was like, oh, that's like, yes, that's exactly what it needs to be. And that one video just drove like so many ideas into the game. Yeah, so I can't think, Brian's, I forgot his last name, but Brian's the guy who made that video, and it's amazing. All right, so. I'm not watching it again, it's not that good. So we got a new artist. This is Jonathan Strau. He ended up doing the final art for the game. He's amazing. So I just gave him his own slide. Next. There we go. This thing. How do I get rid of the, never mind. All right, so now I'm gonna start talking about the actual festivals. I wish this, what's going on? Does anybody know why that menu bar is? Thank you. That did not work. That's a good idea. Let's try that. Present. Nice. All right. So yeah, IndieCade and Boston Fig. This is in 2014. So we submitted to both of these. This was before we got new art, and we really didn't have time to address any of the feedback because you submit to these events. I think it's like around April, May, June, and so we got the feedback in March, and we were actually pretty strapped because we had to set up the matchmaking infrastructure so that people could actually play. So like to demo the game, previously we didn't really need a matchmaking thing or anything like that because we could just set it up and be like, okay, these two computers are just going to talk to each other. But if you're sending your build out to everybody, yeah, so we had to think of the logistics of that, and we ended up not being able to address any of the GDC feedback. And then, so I was going to talk a little bit about the review process. So for Boston Fig, everybody knows what Boston Festival of Indie Games is, right? It's really cool. So we submitted in June, received a rejection notice in August. And this is typically how it goes when you're submitting to these things. It's like you don't hear back for like 3 months, and then you won't demo the game for another like 4. But we were offered to be sponsors at the event for $200. Again, the event started in September, and during this year, so we reapplied this year, but during this year we didn't receive any feedback for the game. It was just like, nope, sorry, you didn't get in. The IndieCade review process, that also started around May. You're notified every time a juror plays your game, and I think there was over 400 IndieCade jurors. Only one of them played our game. You'll get feedback from the juror or how to improve your game, which is really cool. And I'll talk about this later, but both of those events have improved that process. And now, like, you'll get really great feedback, but, you know, Boston Fig didn't even give feedback until this year. These are just kind of reiterating, we submitted the game with old art. So this is us kind of trying to justify, like, okay, why didn't we get in, you know? So the one piece of feedback we did get from IndieCade, I figured I'd just show you guys. I thought the base idea was compelling. The major factors of gameplay that I would consider improving are, and then it was very difficult to understand what firing order was, hype up the countdown before your decision, and then hype up the chaos, the same spot interaction or feedback. So the third one's talking about if you place 2 bandits on top of each other. Before we would just kill them both. So we actually addressed all that feedback. We thought it was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then so we ended up going with these alternatives. So at Boston Fig, we did pay the $200 for a table. And then for IndieCade, we were offered a chance to show at Indie Exchange. And so Indie Exchange happens on the first day of IndieCade. And it's really, I have a hard time understanding, you're just not in the showcase, but you still get to show your game. So we were like, whatever, that's all we really want to do. So we did that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that after. But so the takeaway from those 2 events for 2014 was like, you know, you could potentially get some feedback from judges, which is, you know, good. Submissions, they also kind of helped guide our production schedule, which I think that became something that happened a lot more later. But we started to think of what we should work on next in terms of like what we were submitting for next. And it was also just a really good way to keep us on track. So like I was saying before, we needed a matchmaking infrastructure so that judges could play. So that was like, okay, we need that next. You know, that's the next highest priority. And then we were also debating things like, should we have a single player mode ready for IndieCade, or should we keep working on the multiplayer mode? That was like a big source of contention between me and my partner, Michael Kwan, who also worked on this game. So submissions, yeah, can also help focus your project. Again, the art is really important. And then lastly, take feedback with a grain of salt. This particular year, it was fine, but your feedback isn't always going to be good. So, I just put Jonathan Blow Twitter stream up on the top there. I thought it was interesting that he said this, but I don't know. Could you guys read that? Do you want me to read it out loud? He's basically just saying that, like, he got really bad feedback from the Independent Games Festival the year he won a design award. So Boston Fig, this is our first official showing. And so we wanted the booth to stand out and excite people. This is sort of, I guess, like a philosophy I have, or I'm sort of developing. I used to work as a projectionist in a movie theater, and my manager, my first day of the job, my manager talked to me about, just the position, and he was telling me that, like, for a lot of people, this is like their one chance to go out, in like all year. Like, this is going to be their only chance to go see a movie, and like I totally related to that, and he's like, so just make sure you make their experience as good as you can. And so when we were starting to talk about our booth, like, that really stuck with me. Like, whoever's coming to this event, like, I really want them to be able to, like, talk about our booth or, like, just be really excited to see it. So that kind of drove how we were going to set up our booth. This is also the first time we've ever been interviewed on camera. And like the previous kind of rogue showings of Fuego helped. And then also just kind of having a pitch kind of helped with that. Boston Fig's kind of small relative to some of the other events. There's only 3,500 people. So it was a good place to kind of get our feet wet. And then, again, it cost $200. So this ended up being our booth at Boston Fig. So you can see, like, the barrels and stuff there. We ended up not having to spend any money on any of that stuff. What we ended up doing was, like, I went around my local town, like, asking people if they had anything that we could use. And eventually we were led to a salvage yard, which was like half an hour away from us. And they had all this stuff, and so we were like going through it all. We're like, oh yeah, we could use that. And the barrel idea we had from the beginning. So we were primarily looking for a barrel so that people could play on that. And when we went up to, we were gonna like rent out the items, and we kind of told the people our story, and they were like, well, do you guys know anything about computers? And we're like, yeah, sure. And so we ended up doing like a barter with them. This is, I'm gonna give them a plug. They're called Silver Fox. They're in Troy. Troy, New York, that is. And we're like, yeah, sure. So we ended up like fixing their computers, and they gave us all this stuff to use. So we thought it was fair. First interview, I'm not really gonna go through that, but you get the idea. Boston Fig. So yeah, takeaways from this one was just like, take your booth seriously. Try to make it a really fun experience for people. It kind of like it's kind of like a externalized version of your game, and maybe even yourselves. Boston Fig, so let's see, what else do we have here? Banner stands. So we didn't, my partner didn't think we needed banner stands, and we tried to hot glue our banners onto a piece of wood and then string them up. Whenever you're trying to cut corners like that, just don't. So the banners like ended up falling down all day, and at the worst times, and they were like falling on people's heads, and I don't know, they got like glue in their hair. It's like, never doing that again. Also because of like when we submitted and when the actual event was, we were able to like work out a lot of the kinks that the submission had. So like we were able to get the new art into the game. We were able to like fix a lot of the mechanical problems with the game. And so when we showed it at Boston Fig, we really didn't know what the reception would be, but it was really good. It was like a second win for us, because we were pretty drained at this point. And then, so we went to IndieCade. This is us showing in a rogue setting again. There's a thing called the night games at IndieCade, and we saw an empty tent during the night games, so we ended up just booting up our laptops and luring people into the dark tent, which is really sketchy in retrospect. But yeah, so that's some people playing the game, and let's see. We also were able to find really cool developers. Does everybody know who those people are? I'm just curious. Name them if you do. Bennett Foddy. Anybody else know? Ben Esposito, he's working on Donut County. And Eric Zimmerman, he did Diner Dash. So we actually kidnapped all of them and brought them to a froyo shop. And we set up our game in Pinkberry. And we promised the Pinkberry guy that we weren't trying to hack into their system because it looked really sketchy. And we got them to play our game in a Pinkberry. And like, again, just hearing them talk about our game together and like, not argue, but just discuss it and like their own different philosophies on what it should be and like them trying to understand what we were going for, just produced a ton of good ideas and like kind of helped guide us moving forward. We also showed it, this is at IndieCade, we also showed it at a place called Glitch City, which is like a common workspace. It's really cool. If you're in LA, you should just contact Ben or somebody and ask to check it out. And of course, we showed at the game tasting event. And we got like a Best in Show award. And they were like, you guys should come back later and show it again. So again, it was like, we didn't get into IndieCade, but like we just went anyway and tried to make the best of it. I mean, if you count game tasting as good again, then we kind of did get in, but. So IndieCade, kind of went through most of the takeaways. We also found out about other events at IndieCade, so this kind of goes back to the networking thing. We found about a thing called Playcrafting in New York, and then the NYU Game Center has these like play testing nights. So we found out about those. It was good exposure, and then the only cost was like the IndieCade submission, which was $35. And they gave you free passes since we did the game tasting thing. So right around IndieCade is the IGF submission. And so like to me, I kind of look at like the whole circuit as like starts and ends with IGF, the awards. So the IGF submission, during the IndieCade, we were also submitting to the IGF. When we submitted to IGF, at this point, we really didn't have any coverage. Our Greenlight campaign didn't start, and so yeah. I think that's just a sad truth. There's just so many games that get submitted. If you don't have coverage, judges are probably not going to look at your game. The other thing is that you do get assigned a judge, but I don't know how many. I guess we only got assigned one. But judges are also able to like see a list of games or something like that, and like play the game and then judge on it too. So exposure. We did get some exposure just by submitting to IGF, and there's really, I guess there's no harm in submitting to IGF. I might go back on what I said. Just there's no harm, I suppose, in submitting to IGF. Because you're allowed to resubmit the following year if you don't get in. So one of our biggest problems, again, was exposure. And then around this time, we decided to start doing the Greenlight campaign. And that's like the first time we started thinking about press announcements for our game. And then the Indie Mega Booth submission. So yeah, being in the Mega Booth is amazing. We didn't actually know that at the time, though. It was kind of like, oh, we should submit to this thing, too, because it looks kind of cool. And so when we submitted to the Mega Booth, our Greenlight campaign kind of lined up perfectly with the submission. So basically, when we kind of sent out our press blast to everybody, we were submitting to the Mega Booth. So like all that PR that we got, people at the Mega Booth saw, and one kind of helps the other. And we also, one big thing is like, we knew we needed to cut a new gameplay video. At the time, our gameplay video still had old art. And we didn't realize it, but your gameplay videos are super important for just trying to get into festivals. Like, sometimes I think people just look at the gameplay video, and if it's not up to par, they just won't even play the game. There's just too many games to go through. So we knew, like, we kind of went in with that mentality, so we wanted to keep it short. So we, set like a time limit of like 3 minutes. So I'll just kind of show a little bit of like what we did with the gameplay video.
Hey.
Previously to showing or to having this gameplay video, it's multiplayer, but we used to just show a single screen. So you couldn't really understand that it was multiplayer. So in this gameplay video, we're like, okay, we'll have both of our screens, on the screen at the same time.
Hey, this is Michael.
This is Eddie. We make up the game studio radio.
Okay,
Mexican
skip ahead. So it
standoff
shows us
phase.
like playing against each other.
Here, Eddie and I are placing bandits on the field, trying to aim their guns at like these banks. And once we start seeing each other's bandits show up to each other, we each get the exact same bandits as each other each placement round, and we also have the same 10-second time span to place them. Shootout
Okay, so as you can see, this is like already 100 times better than
guns are pretty
the first video that I didn't really show you, but you can just tell. So the Mega Boost submission, so we got into the Mega Boost, which was awesome, and we were able to talk to Kelly and Chris, who run the Mega Booth, about, just like what was the process like, and they told us that like the reason they selected us was because of the gameplay video alone. They were just super impressed by like, how concise we were with it and how to the point we were and stuff like that. So Kelly wrote up a really good article about, if you're submitting to the Mega Booth, how to get in. I suggest you Google it. You could probably just Google like Kelly Indie Mega Booth, and you'll find it. Things we kind of learned from the Mega Boost submission, like super important to maybe time your press stuff with your submissions if you can. Obviously, it's not everybody can't do that, but it does help, I think. And your gameplay video is super important. Also, Kelly Wallach and Chris Floyd are really, really cool people. So just throw that out there. How you advertise and present your game is also, really important. I think prior to this, we were kind of living in this ideal world where it's like, this is the game, and if you can't appreciate it, then you're stupid. But that's really stupid, and you have to make sure that you're educating people about why your game is good. So that includes how your website looks, what your screenshots are, and of course your gameplay video. Try to get to the point quickly. That's another thing we learned. Don't give them 30-minute videos. Like, think about getting 400 submissions and then you're looking at a 30-minute video. Like, who's gonna watch that? Nobody's gonna watch that. Come on. And then spend a lot of time on it. So at this point, we kind of went through the circuit once. There's events that I'll talk about that we submitted to that we didn't get it. I'll talk about it this I kind of go through like a part 2. So in January 2015, this is kind of like a summary. We got into the Mega Booth. We got on Steam Greenlight. We were continuing to show at smaller events, so Playcrafting New York City and NYU Playtesting Night. There's probably other stuff in there that I'm forgetting. And then if you contrast that to January 2014, that was when we first showed here at GMGF. So I thought that was kind of like okay, we're actually like moving in a direction. Yeah. So the other thing that I kind of add to this is just that these small events that we went to were just as important as the big ones. So just keep that in mind when you're showing your game. So this is our booth, Indie Mega Booth. Again, we kind of kept the same idea of like try to make your booth as cool as possible. We did learn at the Indie Mega Booth that it's really hard to compete with people who have money. So, there's like a, you can't see it, but there's like, I forget forget what it's called. It's like Just Beats or something like that. And it was like a 62-inch TV. It was just like, well, so I do suggest maybe getting bigger monitors than we had. If we went back to the mega booth, we would totally do that. So there's about 100,000 people at PAX East over the 3 days. So if you contrast that to the stuff we were showing at before, it's like, whoa, Bring friends if you're going to show there, because you're going to need their help. It's exhausting. You're probably going to get sick, and just keep those things in mind. It cost us $2,000 to exhibit in that booth area, which is 10 by 10. That's even just going through the mega booth. So we were asking ourselves, like, that's a lot of money for us. We're completely independent. We don't have any publishers or anything. So we were asking ourselves, like, should we sell anything? Like, is it even going to be possible? Should we sell like keys to our game? Which, by the way, don't do that. Valve doesn't like that. So we ended up not trying to sell anything. We just thought it would be too much of a hassle, and that really wasn't the reason we were there. Another kind of takeaway from this whole talk is, like, if you're applying for an event, or if you're trying to figure out if you should go to the event, just try to figure out, like, what you're trying to get out of it. Again, and think about, like, those things I was talking about, like, are you trying to, like, meet other developers? Are you trying to network? Are you just trying to, like, get exposure? There's a lot of reasons to go to these events. The mega booth is also really great. One thing I haven't talked about yet is, but it's great for press. The press go around in the morning, like the event starts at like 10 or 9 maybe, and the press will come around an hour before that and just play all the games. So make sure you're ready for that. Have your press kit set up so they can contact you prior to the event. And then also, like, the mega booth does a thing with Twitch, and so we were asked to, like, kind of like talk about our game on Twitch, and that had like 35,000 viewers, which is really cool. And again, we just ended up handing out free stuff because, like, if you think about it, like having to like do this transaction with like your phone or something, and then like I don't know, the reception's terrible. I don't know, it just sounded awful. And I was talking to other devs who were actually selling stuff, and they didn't make that much money anyway. So make sure you have somebody spot check your hair. So it's Michael, and realizing his hair is all messed up in the Twitch stream video. So the IGF results came around, and this is just like this is the only I said one judge played it. Also, if you just think about like the time between when we got the results and like when we submitted in October and we got the results in April. So like there's always this huge gap, which kind of sucks. But again, this guy, he's like, I'm feeling it, but it's just not everything's there, which is fine, So again, I kind of see the circuit starting and ending with the IGF. So round 2, we are going to reapply to Boston Fig in IndieCade. This time around, we also applied to a thing called Casual Connect, and we also applied to South by Southwest. And again, the judging process changed this time around. Boston Fig, it's like a 3-round process. Let's see if I talk about that. Yeah. I'll talk about it real quick. Boston Fig, it's like the first round, they only look at your gameplay video. If it's good enough, then you make it on to the second round. If it's not, then that's pretty much, I think, where you stop. I don't know. We made it all the way through this year, but the second round is you'll get reviewed, and then the last round, I think they review for like awards, and that's like a smaller group of juries. South by Southwest, this is kind of, we ended up deciding not to go to this one, and I feel like that was a bad decision, but it was, they wanted to charge $1,200 for a booth, and then we had to pay for plane and hotel. So on the opposite side of it, like the reasons we wanted to go, it's like cross exposure, because the event consists of like music and movies as well. So we probably would have gotten people who don't really know a lot about games, and we could have gotten their input on the game and stuff like that. Casual Connect we went to, this is in San Francisco. We really didn't know a lot about the event going into it, and it turned out to be super biz dev event. So they talked a lot about monetization. Pretty much half of the people that came to our booth asked us how we were going to monetize our game. And it seemed like most of the people there were also interested in selling you a better way to monetize your game. So it probably wasn't worth it to go to that one. So just sorry, Casual Connect. They did pay like some percentage of your hotel stay, which was really cool. But yeah, I don't know if it was worth it really. I couldn't really gain actionable things that we got from that. This time around, we got Boston Fig feedback. This thing really bugged me. So the scoring was 1 to 10, and this year they had like different categories of judging. So they had like a technical category, educational, story, and they had all these categories. And we ended up getting a 1, which is the worst score you could get on technical. So I don't know. Judging, it's probably not always great. I don't think there's. I think there's not really a well-defined process for who should be a judge at these events. It seems like you could get somebody with just like 2 years of experience at like Zanga, and then you could have this other guy who has like really 15 years of experience. So it's kind of a toss-up there. So just take any feedback you get with a grain of salt. I'll fight anybody who says we should have gotten a 1 in technical. Oh yeah, and this is his quote. "This is not a game that plays with much in the way of complexity in terms of scope. It doesn't push the envelope as far as I can see. So I'm going to give you a 1. Works perfectly though, so I don't know. And then some of the other feedback we'd get was like our fault. Judges didn't really understand our design, like the design that we were going for. So like a lot of the things that we would hear is like, I really wish I could see what bandits I got before I got them. Like I wish I knew all the bandits I'll get in a match. And that's like a decision that we consciously made. Like we didn't want people to have that information. We didn't want them to have to think about that. But really the judge has no way of knowing that. And so I think the other thing I would say to people is like, it's one thing that we still want to do is like kind of have like a design like FAQ. Because like we'll often get questions like that. Like, and I think it's also just from a player's perspective, it's really cool to see like why you made some of the decisions that you made. We haven't done it yet, but I really want to have a design FAQ somewhere on our website. And then we got some IndieCade feedback. Like this is like two contrasting different feedback. This year we got 4 judges to play our game, which is a step up from the year before that, which is just the 1. So again, yeah, I kind of just talked about these, but can go on. So the tail end, we're releasing November 16th. At this point, we're kind of done showing the game. We're kind of set on the design. So it's kind of really just talking about how we got there. This is my first talk. And we've also applied to speak at GDC. And we're resubmitting to IGF. So I'll show you, this is kind of never before seen launch trailer. I was going to show you guys. How do I zoom in there? How do I maximize it? All right. Yeah. You guys are pros.
Uno, dos, tres, cuatro.
Thank you.